Ethan Cole had always believed that silence was his strongest companion. He grew up on wide, open land where the wind was louder than people and the sky felt bigger than his worries. As a child, he followed his father around the ranch, copying every movement, every habit, and every rule. His father used to say, "A cowboy doesn't complain, he keeps going." And Ethan carried those words into adulthood like a promise he could never break. Now, many years later, Ethan was the only one left to care for the ranch. His father had passed away 2 years earlier, and since then, the land had become heavier than ever before. The ranch was old, large, and full of memories. Some memories hurt, some gave him strength, but all of them kept him tied to the soil. He could not leave, even if the weight of the work was crushing him day by day. Every morning, Ethan woke up before the sun. The world was still dark, but the quiet held a strange comfort for him. He would sit for a moment on the edge of his bed, rubbing his tired eyes, telling himself he could get through another day. Then he'd pull on his boots, step outside, and breathe in the cool air. The stars above him would slowly fade as the sunrise approached, painting the sky with soft colors. Sometimes that peaceful moment was the only time of day when he felt truly calm. His first stop was always the barn. The horses knew his footsteps and greeted him with gentle sounds. He loved those animals deeply, even if he rarely admitted it. They didn't ask questions, they didn't judge him, they didn't expect him to be anything other than who he was. And for a man who carried so much without speaking about it, that felt like a gift. He would brush their coats, check their hooves, and whisper small words of comfort to them, even though he never spoke like that to people. But the ranch was struggling. A long drought had dried the land, leaving the grass yellow and brittle. The fences were old and breaking in many places. The barns needed repairs, and the roof of the house leaked when it rained. The water pump had been giving him trouble for months, and every time he thought about calling someone to fix it, a new expense appeared. Money was tight, work was endless, and the feeling of trying to do everything alone was slowly draining the strength from his bones. Still, Ethan told himself he had no choice. His father built this ranch with his bare hands, and Ethan felt it was his duty to keep it alive. Even on the hardest days, he pushed himself, not wanting anyone to see him struggle. He didn't want pity. He didn't want help. He didn't want to hear people say the ranch was too big for one man to manage. He already knew that. But letting go of responsibility was something he didn't know how to do. His life continued like that, quiet, lonely, and exhausting, until the day Maya Turner arrived in town. She came as the new veterinarian, replacing the older doctor who had retired. People in the small town talked about her with warm curiosity. They said she was kind, gentle, and incredibly patient. They said she understood animals better than most people understood each other. Ethan didn't think much about it. He wasn't the type to care about new arrivals or town gossip, but life has a strange way of changing when a person least expects it. Their first meeting was unexpected. One of Ethan's horses, Amber, had injured her leg. He tried to treat it himself, but the injury was more serious than he could handle. He finally accepted that he needed professional help, though his pride felt a small sting. When he called the clinic, Maya answered and told him she would come right away. He waited outside near the barn as the sun hung low in the sky. The light was soft, casting warm shadows across the dry fields. Ethan crossed his arms, trying to hide the exhaustion he felt. He didn't want a stranger to see him tired or worried. He wanted to appear strong, steady, and in control, even though everything inside him felt like it was slowly slipping. Then he saw her truck approaching. Maya stepped out carrying her medical bag, her expression warm and calm. She wasn't intimidated by Ethan's serious appearance or his quiet nature. Instead, she greeted him with a gentle smile. "You must be Ethan," she said softly. He nodded. "Horse is inside." Maya followed him to the stall where Amber rested. She spoke to the horse with a soothing voice, her hands moving gently as she checked the leg. Ethan watched, surprised at how easily Amber relaxed around her. It had been a long time since he saw one of his animals trust someone so quickly. "You did the right thing calling me," Maya said, turning to him. "She needs treatment, but she will be okay." Ethan nodded again, uncomfortable with praise. "Just doing what needed to be done." Maya studied him for a moment, noticing the shadows under his eyes, the worn-out clothes, the way he stood stiffly as if holding up more than just his own weight. She didn't comment on any of it. She only said, "Your horse is lucky to have you." Those simple words struck him unexpectedly, not because they were dramatic, but because they were warm, honest. He wasn't used to anyone seeing his effort or acknowledging it. After treating Amber, Maya packed her tools and prepared to leave. Before stepping into her truck, she gave Ethan a gentle look, the kind that tries to understand without pushing. "This is a beautiful ranch," she said quietly, "but it looks like a lot of work for one person." He stiffened slightly. "I manage." She didn't argue. She only nodded. "If you ever need help, any kind of help, I'm around." He didn't respond. He simply stood there as she drove away, her words echoing inside his mind long after she disappeared down the dirt road. That night, Ethan sat alone on the porch, watching the stars. He thought about the day, about the ranch, about everything he carried, and for some reason he thought about the soft way Maya had said those last words. "If you ever need help." He shook his head, pushing the thought away. He had lived his whole life handling things on his own. Asking for help didn't feel natural. It didn't even feel possible. Little did he know that this small meeting, the gentle voice of a woman who saw more than he realized, was the beginning of a change he never expected. A change he desperately needed, even if he hadn't recognized it yet. For now, he remained silent, unaware that someone out there had already noticed the quiet battles he fought. And sometimes that's all it takes for a story to begin. The next few days passed quietly on the ranch, but Ethan found his thoughts drifting back to Maya more often than he expected. He tried to ignore it, busying himself with repairing fences, checking water lines, and caring for Amber. But every now and then, he remembered the calm way she had spoken, the careful way she had treated the injured horse, and the gentle look in her eyes when she told him the ranch was a lot for one person. He told himself it meant nothing. She was just doing her job, and he had his own responsibilities to focus on. But life had a way of bringing people back together. A week later, Amber needed a follow-up check. Ethan knew it was necessary, so he called the clinic. The moment Maya answered the phone, her warm voice surprised him. She remembered him immediately and told him she would come that afternoon. When she arrived, the sun was high, and the fields looked even drier than before. Ethan was near the barn repairing an old wooden gate. Sweat covered his forehead, and his shirt was damp from hours of work. He heard the sound of a truck door closing and turned to find Maya walking toward him with her medical bag in hand. She smiled. "Working hard as always." Ethan nodded, wiping his forehead with the back of his hand. "Gate broke again. Needs new wood." Maya glanced around. The fence behind him was leaning. The barn roof had missing shingles. Tools lay scattered because Ethan didn't have time to organize them. Every part of the ranch showed signs of a man doing everything alone. But she still didn't comment directly. She knew some truths needed to be approached gently, not pushed. "Let me check on Amber first," she said softly. Inside the barn, Amber greeted Maya with a soft, familiar sound. The horse trusted her instantly again. While Maya checked her leg, Ethan watched quietly, admiring how calm and steady she was. She worked with care, asking Ethan a few questions about Amber's behavior. When she finished, she smiled. "She's healing well. You've taken good care of her." Ethan looked away, uncomfortable with any words that felt too kind. Just doing what I can. Maya didn't argue. She simply packed her tools, then walked outside with Ethan. The sunlight made everything look harsher. The dry land, the cracked soil, the tired lines on Ethan's face. "You must be exhausted," she said gently. "I'm fine." Maya tilted her head slightly, not believing him but choosing not to push. Instead, she changed the subject. "Do you eat lunch this late every day?" Ethan shrugged. "Sometimes I forget." Maya placed her medical bag in her truck, then reached behind the seat and pulled out a lunchbox. She held it toward him. "I brought an extra today." Ethan froze, unsure how to respond. No one had brought him lunch since before his father passed away. The simple gesture hit him unexpectedly hard. "You didn't have to," he said quietly. "I know," she replied with a soft smile. "But I wanted to." He hesitated for a long moment before finally accepting it. Maya sat on a wooden crate while Ethan leaned against a fence post. As they ate, the moment felt strangely natural. Peaceful in a way Ethan had almost forgotten existed. Maya talked lightly about the town, the animals she treated, and the small joys she found in her work. Ethan listened more than he spoke, but he didn't mind. Her voice brought a gentle warmth into the dusty air. After lunch, she stood and brushed off her jeans. "I should get going, but I'll be back to check Amber again soon." Ethan nodded. "Thanks. For everything?" Maya smiled again, this time more softly. "You're welcome, Ethan." She left, but something about her presence stayed with him long after her truck disappeared down the road. The next morning, Ethan found himself expecting her to show up, even though he knew she wouldn't. He was annoyed at himself for it. He didn't have time to think about anyone. The ranch demanded all his energy. There was always something breaking, always something needing repair, always another bill arriving in the mail. Still, Maya's gentle smile returned to his mind again and again. A few days later, Ethan's cattle got restless because of the heat. One young calf wandered too close to a loose wire fence and got a minor injury. Ethan treated it himself, but the moment he noticed the calf limping again the next morning, he realized it needed professional care. He didn't want to call Maya. He told himself he could handle it. But as he watched the calf struggle to walk, he knew it wasn't fair to the animal. So he called the clinic again. When Maya answered, her voice brightened slightly. "Ethan, everything okay?" He paused for a moment. "Calf's leg looks bad. Could use some help." "I'll be there soon," she said without hesitation. An hour later, she arrived. As she walked toward the cattle pen, she noticed the tired slump in Ethan's shoulders, the dark circles under his eyes, and the frustration hidden behind his steady expression. "Rough morning?" she asked softly. "Just long," he replied. Maya treated the calf with patient hands. She explained what needed to be done, how to help it heal, and what signs to watch for. Ethan listened carefully, his worry for the calf distracting him from his own exhaustion. When she finished, she washed her hands and looked around the ranch again, the leaning fences, the half-finished repairs, the dry fields. "You really do all of this alone?" she asked softly. "Yes." "And you never get help? From friends or neighbors?" "Don't need help." Maya didn't argue. She only nodded slowly, understanding that the walls Ethan had built weren't made of pride. They were made of years of loneliness and responsibility. She placed a gentle hand on the fence rail and looked out toward the land. "This place has a lot of history, doesn't it?" "My father built it," Ethan said quietly. Maya glanced at him. "And you're trying to protect it all by yourself." At those words, something inside Ethan tightened. He swallowed hard, unable to speak for a moment. Maya's voice wasn't judging, only understanding, and that made it even harder for him to hide his tiredness. Before leaving, she said something he didn't expect. You don't have to carry everything alone, you know. Ethan looked away. I've managed this long. Yes, she said softly. But at what cost to yourself? He didn't answer. As she turned to go, Ethan heard something in her voice. Something gentle, steady, and quietly determined. I'll come by tomorrow to check on the calf again, and maybe... She paused, choosing her words carefully. Maybe I can help with something else, too. Ethan didn't know how to respond. No one had offered to help him in a long time, not out of duty, but out of genuine care. When she drove away, the silence of the ranch felt heavier than usual. The wind carried dust across the field. The sun beat down on the dry soil, and Ethan stood alone, staring at the place Maya had been just moments before. He wasn't sure why her presence made everything feel different. But he knew something had changed, and he knew it wasn't just the ranch. The next few weeks passed with a slow but steady rhythm. Ethan continued working from sunrise to late night, and Maya kept visiting the ranch, not only to check on the calf or Amber, but sometimes simply to make sure Ethan was doing okay. She never said it directly, but Ethan could sense her gentle concern each time she arrived. Her presence had become familiar now. When he saw her truck driving toward the ranch, he felt something inside him relax, something he didn't even know had been tense. He didn't understand it fully, but he didn't push it away either. Still, despite her kindness, Ethan kept most of his worries locked inside. He smiled politely, answered short questions, and never allowed himself to appear weak. Every day he told himself the same thing. You don't have time to fall apart. But the truth was, he was already close to it. The ranch was struggling more than he realized. The drought had grown worse, and the water pump finally stopped working altogether. Without the pump, the animals wouldn't have enough water. Ethan tried fixing it himself, but the parts were old, and he didn't have the money for a new system. On top of that, the mailbox brought more bills every week: equipment loans, feed costs, vet expenses, and land taxes. Each envelope felt heavier than the last, as if they were little reminders of everything he could no longer handle. Still, he pushed himself. He worked harder, slept less, and carried more weight every day. He didn't tell Maya any of this. He didn't want her to worry. He didn't want to be a burden. But life eventually forces a person to face their breaking point. Late one evening, after hours of trying to repair the pump, Ethan returned to the barn to check on the animals. He walked slowly, dragging his boots across the ground. His arms ached, his back screamed in pain, and his head felt heavy. He hadn't eaten all day. He hadn't rested in days. When he reached the barn, the power flickered twice and went out completely. The old generator had failed again. Ethan stood in the dark, his chest tightening. He reached for the side of a stall to steady himself. His breath trembled. He tried to stay calm, but his mind was spinning. Repairs, bills, drought, broken equipment, lonely nights, and the constant pressure of trying to keep everything together. For the first time in years, Ethan felt truly overwhelmed. He walked deeper into the barn and sat down on a bale of hay, elbows resting on his knees, head lowered. The silence surrounded him, thick and heavy. He had always believed he could handle anything, but now he wasn't so sure. His hands shook slightly as he covered his face. The weight he had been carrying for so long finally began to slip from his control. He tried to breathe deeply, but his chest felt tight. His thoughts were loud, too loud. He felt tired in a way that reached all the way to his heart. He didn't cry. Ethan had forgotten how to cry long ago. But his silence was filled with the kind of pain that didn't need tears to be real. Just then, the barn door creaked open. The soft beam of a flashlight swept across the floor. "Ethan?" Maya's voice echoed gently through the darkness. He stiffened, lifting his head quickly. He didn't want her to see him like this, not tired, not defeated, not vulnerable. But Maya had already seen enough. She walked toward him, her steps slow and careful. When the light fell on his face, her expression softened immediately. She didn't ask questions. She didn't call his name again. She simply understood. "What happened to the power?" she asked softly, her voice steady. "Generator failed," Ethan muttered, clearing his throat. "I'll fix it." He tried to stand, but Maya stepped closer and touched his shoulder lightly. "You don't have to pretend with me, Ethan." He froze at her words. Pretend? That was what he'd been doing every day, pretending he was strong enough, pretending he was fine, pretending he didn't need help. He swallowed hard. "I'm just tired." Her eyes softened. "You're more than tired." Something fragile broke inside him at that moment. He lowered his head again, unable to hold himself upright anymore. Maya kneeled in front of him, placing her flashlight aside. Her presence was calm, like a quiet shelter in the middle of a long storm. "You've been carrying too much alone," she whispered. He didn't deny it. He didn't have the strength to deny anything anymore. For a long moment, they stayed like that, the barn silent, the night cool around them. Ethan's breathing slowed, and his shoulders trembled just slightly, as though he was finally releasing a burden he'd held too long. Maya reached out and gently touched his hand, not pulling, not pushing, simply offering comfort. "Let me help you," she said softly. Those 4 words echoed inside him with surprising force. He had heard people offer help before, but it never sounded like this. Maya wasn't offering out of duty. She wasn't offering out of pity. She was offering because she cared. He finally lifted his eyes to meet hers. In the dim light, he saw understanding, not judgment, not disappointment, just kindness. "Maya," he began, his voice rough, but she shook her head gently. "You don't have to explain," she said. "You've been strong for so long." "But strength doesn't mean being alone." Ethan's throat tightened. For years he had believed the opposite. He thought strength meant silence, independence, and carrying everything without asking for help. But now, looking at Maya, he realized something simple and powerful. He was tired of fighting alone. He took a slow breath and leaned back slightly, letting his shoulders fall. He didn't say yes. He didn't know how to accept help so easily, but he didn't pull away either. And sometimes not pulling away is the first step toward allowing someone in. Maya stayed beside him until his breathing became steady again. She didn't rush him. She didn't force conversation. She simply stayed, offering quiet support. After a while, she stood and looked around the dark barn. "Let me help you get the lights back on," she said gently. He nodded, not trusting his voice. They worked side by side to reconnect the generator. Ethan explained what needed to be done, and Maya listened carefully, handing him tools, holding wires and shining the flashlight where he needed it. Together, they finally got the generator running again. The barn lights flickered back on, filling the space with warm, steady brightness. When they finished, Ethan leaned against the wall, exhausted but calmer. Maya stood beside him, her expression soft. "You don't have to reach the breaking point before you let someone help," she said. He looked at her, grateful in a way he couldn't express in words. For the first time in a long, long while, Ethan felt the weight on his shoulders lighten, just a little. And as Maya walked him back toward the house, her voice gentle in the quiet night, Ethan realized something important. Maybe he didn't have to carry his world alone anymore. Maybe someone finally cared enough to stay. The morning after Ethan's breaking point felt different. He woke up slowly, not because he wanted extra sleep, but because his body simply refused to move. His muscles ached, his back hurt, and his mind felt strangely lighter and heavier at the same time. He sat on the edge of his bed, remembering how Maya had stayed calm beside him in the barn, how she had helped him fix the generator, and how she had spoken to him without judgment. The memory brought him comfort and embarrassment at the same time. He wasn't used to letting anyone see him weak, but Maya hadn't treated him like a weak person. She treated him like someone who deserved support. That was new to him. So new it left him unsure about how to act now. But Maya kept her promise. She visited the ranch again that afternoon, checking on the animals and making sure Ethan was all right. She didn't bring up the night before. She didn't tease him or question him. Instead, she smiled as if nothing unusual had happened, giving him space to feel normal again. Ethan appreciated that more than she knew. Over the next few days, Maya became a steady presence on the ranch. Sometimes she arrived early to help with simple chores, feeding the horses, checking the fences, or carrying equipment that Ethan pretended wasn't too heavy for him. Other times, she brought him meals, saying she had made too much food and didn't want it to go to waste. Ethan knew she was just being kind, but each gesture touched him deeply. He didn't say much, but he watched her closely. He saw how gently she moved, how carefully she listened, how naturally she smiled. And slowly he began to trust her with small things, things he never shared with anyone else. One morning, Maya arrived with a small notebook in her hand. Ethan raised an eyebrow as she walked toward him with determined steps. "What's that?" he asked. "A list," she said, holding the notebook up proudly. "Everything on the ranch that needs fixing." Ethan frowned. "You made a list of my chores?" Maya laughed softly. "Not chores, projects. And don't worry, I didn't write everything. Only the things that are important for safety and daily work." He shook his head, trying not to smile. "You didn't have to do that." "I know," she replied gently, "but it helps. And now we can decide which tasks to do first." Ethan looked at her, confused. "We?" "Yes, Ethan, we." The simple word made something inside him shift. He had never used the word "we" for ranch work his entire life. It had always been "I." But hearing Maya include herself so naturally felt both comforting and overwhelming. She walked toward the closest fence post and tapped it. "This one is loose. We should fix it before the cattle push it over." Ethan couldn't argue. She was right, so he grabbed his tools while Maya held the wood in place. They worked together, the sun warm on their backs, the breeze soft around them. It felt strange at first, having someone next to him while he worked. But slowly, it became natural. And not just natural, it became good. When the fence was fixed, Maya wiped her forehead and smiled at him. "See? Easier when there are two people." Ethan didn't answer, but he didn't disagree either. As days turned into weeks, Maya's presence changed the ranch. The repairs that Ethan had postponed for months were finally being completed. The barn became cleaner, the tools more organized, and even the animals seemed calmer. Whenever Ethan grew tired, Maya noticed. Whenever he forgot to eat, she reminded him. Whenever he pushed himself too hard, she gently encouraged him to slow down. One afternoon, they worked together to repair a broken irrigation line. The sun was hot and the ground was dry, but Maya didn't complain once. She kneeled beside Ethan, digging through the soil with her gloved hands. "You know," she said with a small laugh, "I never imagined I'd be helping repair irrigation pipes in the middle of a ranch." Ethan smirked. "Not what you dreamed of?" "Actually," she said thoughtfully, "helping people, helping animals, has always been what I dreamed. And today, I'm doing both." Her words made Ethan pause. For a long moment, he didn't know what to say. Finally, he spoke quietly. "You help more than you know." Maya looked at him, her expression softening. "And you deserve all the help you get." Ethan looked away quickly, pretending to focus on the pipe. Compliments were still hard for him, but her words stayed with him as they finished the repair and walked back toward the barn. Later that evening, Maya stayed a little longer than usual. The sun dipped behind the hills, painting the sky with soft pink and orange colors. Ethan stood beside her, leaning lightly against the fence as they watched the cattle settle down for the night. "It's peaceful here," Maya said quietly. "Most of the time," Ethan replied. Maya turned her head toward him. "It must have been hard, doing all of this alone." He didn't answer right away. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable, just thoughtful. Finally, he spoke. "Yeah, it was." He paused, then added softly, "It still is sometimes." Maya nodded slowly. "But it doesn't have to be." Her voice was gentle, so gentle that Ethan felt the truth settle deep inside him. He wasn't used to sharing his burdens. He wasn't used to letting anyone in. But Maya was different. She didn't force him to open up. She simply stayed, quietly helping until his walls began to bend. That night, as she prepared to leave, she touched the old wooden gate and looked back at him. "I'll come again tomorrow, but only if you don't mind." He surprised himself by answering without hesitation. "I don't mind." She smiled, a warm, soft smile that stayed with him long after her truck disappeared down the road. Over the next few weeks, more changes followed. Maya talked to a few local neighbors about the ranch, and to Ethan's surprise, people began showing up to help. Not because he asked, but because Maya inspired them. They fixed fences, brought feed supplies, and helped repair the roof of the barn. At first, Ethan felt uncomfortable with so many people around. He wasn't used to accepting help, but Maya stayed close, guiding him through the process, reminding him gently that he wasn't alone anymore. One day, as they finished repairing a large section of fencing, Ethan stood back and looked at the ranch. It was still far from perfect, but it was better than it had been in years. The barn looked stronger, the fences stood straighter, and the fields had a sense of hope again. Maya walked beside him, brushing dirt off her hands. "Look at how much has changed." Ethan nodded, his voice quiet. "Yeah, a lot has." Maya smiled at him. "That's what happens when you let people in." He didn't reply, but she saw understanding in his eyes. That evening, as they sat on the porch drinking cold water, Maya leaned back against the wooden railing and looked at Ethan with gentle curiosity. "Do you ever think," she asked softly, "maybe the ranch wasn't the only thing that needed healing?" Ethan's breath caught for a moment. He looked at the ground, his fingers tightening around his glass. He knew she was right, not because she said it, but because he could feel the truth inside his chest. He had been broken in quiet ways, ways he never admitted to anyone. But Maya had slowly, patiently helped him put the pieces back together. And for the first time in many years, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Not just for the ranch, but for himself. Ethan walked across the quiet ranch yard with slow steps, feeling the cool evening air touch his skin. The sky was turning a mix of orange, pink, and soft gold as the sun moved toward the horizon. It was the same ranch he had lived on his whole life, the same fields he had worked on since he was a boy. But today everything felt different, lighter, calmer, almost peaceful. He stopped near the fence and let his hand rest on the wood, the same place where he had once stood feeling lost. But now he felt something new, something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The repairs on the ranch were almost finished. The broken fences had been fixed. The barns looked stronger. The fields were slowly recovering after months of struggle. Even the horses seemed healthier, more relaxed, as if they too sensed the change. Ethan knew he hadn't done all this alone. He finally accepted that he didn't have to. Maya walked out of the barn, brushing dust off her hands. She looked tired, but her smile was gentle, warm, and full of quiet pride. She had helped him with so much more than work. She had helped him breathe again. She walked toward him, stopping beside him at the fence. "You're staring at the sky like it's telling you a secret," she said with a small laugh. He smiled, a soft, genuine smile that came naturally now. "Maybe it is." Or maybe I'm just realizing how different everything feels. Maya leaned her arms on the fence and looked out toward the fields with him. It does feel different, she agreed. Not perfect, but better. Ethan nodded. Perfect had never been his goal. Peace was what he had needed. Support was what he had been afraid to accept. But now, standing beside her, he understood that life didn't become easier because problems disappeared. It became easier when someone stood with you through them. You know, he said quietly, I used to think asking for help meant I wasn't strong enough. Maya didn't interrupt him. She let him speak like she always did. But now I see that trying to carry everything alone, that was the real weakness, he continued. I was hurting myself without even knowing it. Maya turned to him slowly, her expression soft but serious. Ethan, you were never weak. You were just trying to survive. You were tired, and you were grieving. And you were stuck in a fight that wasn't meant for one person. He looked down for a moment, feeling her words settle inside him. They didn't hurt. They healed. I'm glad you showed up that day, he said. I'm glad you didn't walk away. She smiled gently. I didn't walk away because I saw something in you. I saw a man who kept fighting even when everything felt heavy. I saw someone who deserved help. Ethan took a slow breath. And you gave it, even when I tried to push you away. Her eyes softened. I didn't give up because I knew you needed someone. Maybe not to fix everything, but to stand with you. They stood in silence for a few seconds, watching the colors of the sunset spread across the sky. The wind moved lightly through the grass, creating a soft, rustling sound that matched the calmness around them. Everything felt gentle, like the world was finally giving him a break. Maya shifted slightly, turning to face him more fully. Her voice dropped into a warm, sincere tone. Ethan, let me help you. Not just today, not just with work. Let me help you as long as you need someone. He turned to her slowly, the words hitting him deeper than he expected. She had said similar things before, but today it felt different. Today, he was ready to hear it, ready to accept it. Her voice was steady, not demanding, not forceful, just honest. For years, he had believed he had to stand alone. For years, he had carried the ranch, his father's memory, and all his worries on his own back. But now he realized something important. He didn't want to stand alone anymore, and he didn't have to. Maya, he said, his voice almost a whisper. I think I've been waiting for someone to say that for a long time. She didn't say anything. She just stepped a little closer, her presence calm and comforting, like a steady hand on his shoulder. You don't have to keep fighting every battle by yourself, she said softly. You've done enough alone. Let someone share the weight. He nodded slowly. His chest felt lighter, almost too light compared to the heaviness he had lived with. He wasn't used to feeling this free, but he didn't want the feeling to go away. They walked toward the barn together, checking on the horses for the night. Ethan moved quietly, but his silence wasn't the same as before. This silence was peaceful, not lonely. Maya helped him refill the water trough and check the doors. They laughed about something small, how one of the horses always acted like he deserved special attention, and the sound of their laughter filled the barn in a way that felt warm and right. When they finished, they stepped outside. The sky was darker now, filled with stars beginning to appear. The ranch looked calm, almost magical in the soft light. Ethan realized that it wasn't the ranch itself that felt different. It was him. He wasn't carrying the same weight he once had. Maya looked up at the sky and said, It's beautiful tonight. Ethan didn't look at the stars. He looked at her. Yeah, he said quietly. It is. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about the next problem, the next bill, the next repair. He wasn't planning how he would fight his battles. Instead, he was simply standing there, feeling the moment, knowing he was no longer alone. They walked toward the house, their steps slow, not rushed. The night was cool, and the quiet around them felt peaceful, not empty. When they reached the porch, Ethan paused. "You've changed my life, Maya," he said sincerely. "You walked in when everything was falling apart, and you helped me put it back together." She shook her head softly. "No, Ethan. You did the hard work. I just stood beside you." "That's the part I needed the most," he replied. She smiled, and the look in her eyes was warm enough to make the night feel brighter. Ethan opened the door, and they stepped inside the house. It didn't feel lonely anymore. It felt like a place where something new could begin, something steady and hopeful. He turned to her again. "I'm ready," he said, "ready to stop fighting alone." Maya nodded. "Then we'll face everything together." He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. There would still be challenges, still be days that felt heavy, but now he knew he wouldn't be facing them by himself. He had someone who cared, someone who understood, someone who stood with him, not out of obligation, but out of genuine kindness. That night, Ethan finally allowed himself to rest. Truly rest. Not the tired sleep of someone exhausted from working alone, but the peaceful sleep of someone who knew he had support. Someone who knew he was no longer carrying everything alone. And in the quiet of that night, as the sky stretched above the ranch and the stars slowly brightened, Ethan realized something he had forgotten long ago. Life becomes more beautiful when you let someone walk beside you. For the first time in years, his heart felt full. For the first time in years, he felt free. And for the first time in years, he finally believed he deserved help, happiness, and a future where he didn't have to fight alone anymore.